Hi everyone, Professor Lamar here, and welcome to another mini lecture video. Here in this mini lecture video, we're going to talk about two different ways that we can design research studies: experiments and non-experiments. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's talk about the experimental method. The basic premise of this is that we have two variables, an independent variable and a dependent variable. And our goal as researchers is to see if we can create changes in the outcome or dependent variable of the study by manipulating the IV, or independent variable, first. We think that if we can change or manipulate the IV, it'll lead to changes in the DV. So let's think of an example of this. What's a variable where if you change it, it'll lead to changes in another variable? Maybe, for instance, we could look at the relationship between sleep and happiness. We think that if we assign participants to sleep about 8 hours a night, they might be more happier than participants who sleep 2 hours a night. So what we could do is design an experiment where we have a group of 100 participants and we assign half of them to sleep 8 hours a night and half to sleep 2 hours a night. Then we bring everyone into a lab the next day and we give them a happiness survey. We think that by changing the IV, sleep, it's going to lead to changes in the DV, happiness. In this example, to follow up on our video from our video about operational definitions, what's the operational definition for sleep here? Remember, we have two groups. One group sleeps 8 hours, the other group sleeps 2 hours. The operational definition is the thing that changes between each group. 2 hours, 8 hours. The operational definition is the number of hours. Good. Okay, so that was just a quick follow-up, but in this example, we've designed a very simple experiment where we have an IV, sleep, that has 2 levels, and we think that if we manipulate sleep in our participants, it'll affect their happiness. Now, let's talk about what's needed to make something considered a true experiment. There's always 3 key features of an experiment. The first one is manipulation of that independent variable. When a researcher manipulates the IV, they control how much of it participants receive. So in the example of sleep and happiness, as researchers, we manipulated sleep by controlling how much sleep each participant got. Some participants got a little bit more sleep, like 8 hours. Some participants only slept 2. But when we manipulate a variable, we decide how much of that construct or how much of that variable every participant receives. Now, the next feature of an experiment is random assignment. What this means is that all of our participants are just as likely to be placed in one group as another. If these 2 groups are things like 8 hours of sleep and 2 hours of sleep, that means that every participant is just as likely to be assigned to the 8-hour condition as the 2-hour condition. No one's more or less likely to be assigned to any particular group. Everyone is assigned based on random assignment. Okay. Now, random assignment is needed because it ensures that with a high enough sample size, all of those unique idiosyncrasies that participants bring to the table, like participants who function off of 2 hours of sleep regularly, participants who need more sleep, those people are going to be balanced out across the 2 conditions. That's the cool thing about random assignment. It helps us eliminate those confounding variables or extraneous variables that can exist within the participants. Now, the third feature of an experiment is experimental control. What this means is that the researcher tries to control as many other factors as they can within the setting or design of the study. If participants, for instance, take a happiness survey in a lab, then all participants need to receive the exact same instructions for the happiness survey. If some participants see different instructions than others, that could affect how happy they might feel. Maybe, for instance, some instructions are worded really mean and negatively, and other instructions are delivered with an upbeat tone. This could affect how happy people feel. And so that's why it's so important to control everything and eliminate all variations like that. Participants should receive the exact same directions in the exact same tone, in the exact same room, with the exact same lighting and the exact same noise. Everything should be the same. The researcher should try to control as many things as possible so that the only thing that changes in a study is how much of the independent variable participants get. These are the 3 key features of an experiment. And these 3 things are not present in the non-experimental method. With the non-experimental method, all of our variables are just measured. Nothing is manipulated. What this means is that the researcher does not control how much of a variable participants get. We could still work with the same constructs like sleep and happiness, but if we can't manipulate sleep, it means that we can't decide how much sleep participants get. So how could we still measure sleep without determining how much sleep participants receive? Well, we could devise a sleep survey. We could bring participants into a lab and we could ask them a simple question. How many hours of sleep did you get last night? Now, we're not telling participants they have to sleep a certain number of hours. We're just asking them, how many hours did you sleep? That's measuring a variable instead of manipulating it. As researchers, when we measure a variable like sleep, we're not controlling it, but we're still able to capture it with a question. Now, in the non-experimental method, nothing is manipulated. So that means if we wanted to measure sleep and happiness, we'd have to ask how many hours participants slept last night, and then give them a happiness survey to see if those two variables are related. But because we're not manipulating anything or randomly assigning people to different groups, we can't establish cause. Remember, correlation does not imply causation. And with the non-experimental method, we might be able to establish a correlation or relationship between variables. We might see, for instance, that participants who sleep more are happier than participants who don't sleep as much. But that doesn't mean that sleep causes happiness, because we have not manipulated anything in the non-experimental approach. Again, when we just measure variables and we don't manipulate them, we cannot establish causality. Also, what this means is that we don't technically have an IV and a DV. With a non-experimental method, our variables are called predictors and criterions. The predictor variable is that variable that comes first, like sleep. We think that sleep could predict happiness, which is why sleep is the predictor, because it predicts something. There's very little creativity in how we came up with the names of research methods terms. So again, the predictor variable is the variable that's thought to come first, and it predicts the outcomes. That outcome is called the criterion. It's like the outcome variable of the study. In this case, that variable would be happiness. Okay, now one quick note before we close things out today, and that is the difference between the words causal and casual. These words look almost identical because they contain exactly the same letters, and it's just the U and the S that gets switched between them. So I want you to note that a very common thing that happens all the time is that when we talk about correlation and causation, or causality, or a causal relationship, we are talking about one thing causing another. We're not talking about a casual relationship in any way. And so just kind of keep that in mind, that it's a very common thing to kind of see causal and read casual. But for research methods, more often than not, we'll be talking about causal relationships or the lack thereof, not casual relationships. All right, so this brings us to the end of this mini lecture. Really good work, and I'll see you all in the next video.